Hey everyone, in this video on anger, I'm going to talk about dealing with someone who has anger issues. Perhaps if you live with that person or something like that, or you just come across someone who's really angry at you in that moment. So if a person is actually angry towards you, in other words, they are yelling at you or screaming at you or arguing with you or whatever the anger actually looks like, the main thing is to not engage. In other words, do not feed that in any way, shape or form. Now that can be difficult if you know that you're right about something. In other words, if you've been talking about something and what led to that explosion, you feel that you have a justification for having an argument with that person still and so forth. And so it's important to drop the right. In other words, even if you're right in what you're saying and what you're arguing with that person about, because they've gone into anger, and obviously to be in the right, you're in reaction as well. The key is to drop it, and to drop whether you're right, whether they're right, it doesn't matter who's right, but to recognize that if that anger is in the conversation, it will just continue and it will escalate. And we've got worldwide statistics that show how bad that escalation can occur. It's simply not worth it. And if you truly love the person you're talking to, you don't want them to be in anger. Because if you truly observe when someone's in anger, it's destroying first and foremost of themselves. It's a very toxic emotion to be in, to sustain that emotion, even though it then often has an outplay. In this case, it might be towards you. But if you truly adore someone or truly love someone, you don't want them to be in that state because you can feel it's destroying them to stay in that state. And so firstly, out of love for the person, it's like, okay, whoever's right doesn't matter. Whether I'm right, whether you're right, doesn't matter. But I love you so much, I don't want to see you in that state. So I'm going to disconnect from this conversation, or essentially just detach from the conversation. And in so doing, the person has to essentially sort themselves out, but you're no longer fueling the fire, so to speak. So that's absolutely critical. And you can even say something like, let's just take time out, let's just go for a walk, or let's just have our own space on our own, as opposed to being together, so that there's a bit of a circuit breaker and things don't just continue to get out of control. Okay, so in nothing of what I'm saying am I saying that it's about just walking around on eggshells if someone in the house is angry, because that's just playing into, basically the form of control that anger is. So it's definitely not about submitting yourself and just, either pretending that it doesn't exist or trying to, pander to the person, tell them only what they want to hear because they might get upset and things like that. You don't want to live like that. That's, to me, an imprisonment. So it is very possible to address the situation, but what I'm saying is that if the person goes into anger and you feel that there's still enough honesty in the person that they can come back from that, then you can continue the conversation and support them to come back to the honesty of what they're feeling, as opposed to going further into reaction. However, once someone goes into anger and they get locked into that, there's no point continuing the conversation. There just simply is no more purpose, because no matter what you say, even if you express the absolute truth to that person, they will not hear it, because the anger will color their view. And essentially what they're doing in that moment is they're projecting onto you everything that they want to see. And so it matters not how you actually present yourself, because they're already coloring everything that they see anyway. And so in that moment, if you don't feel the person's capable of coming back and becoming more honest, in other words, if you feel that that door has closed and they're no longer willing to be honest, and now they're just in the anger and they've essentially encased themselves in that emotion, and that's now what's coming out, then you just need to disengage and go, okay, no, I'm not participating in this conversation. You need to do whatever you need to do to end that situation and get yourself out of that situation, because that person now needs to cool off and they need to come out of that reaction, which may not resolve the actual issue for them, but at least they'll cool off. And then in that cooling off, they might relax a little bit more, and then they may be a little bit more open to what you have to say. But there are some cases where, we can't actually physically leave the situation, such as if you're sitting on a plane with someone and, they're angry beside you and you've got an 18-hour flight. What do you do? So yes, where you can leave the person physically, but ultimately the real key to addressing a situation like this is to not engage. In other words, no longer engage on that topic of conversation, no longer engage on that level of trying to be right with that person, or proving that they're not right, or whatever it might be, where you've got into that bit of gridlock with them. Because in doing so, that will continue to feed the dynamic that you're having with that person, and they're likely to escalate further and further and things like that. So there's a way of holding your presence where you're not fighting them, but you're also not backing down. In other words, you're not engaging with them on the level that they're wanting to have a fight with you about. And that's the key and the secret, you could say, to dealing with someone with anger. So I'm going to talk more detail about these more specific practical tools when it comes to anger. So stay tuned and I'll talk with you next time.